One of my favorite products for card making are frame dies. Today we're going to explore how to use this basic element to add dimensional interest and elevate our card designs. Welcome to the Crafty Meraki YouTube channel. My name is Marla with Mad About Cards and Crafts, and I'm so glad that you're joining me today. I'm going to be introducing this beautiful Love Like No Other product suite. I have the Presstacular plates. I also have the dies and then the stencils. So we are going to jump right into using the Presstacular plates. I am new to the Better Press and I had so much fun playing with this. These tulips are absolutely gorgeous when they are better pressed into the cardstock. There is just something about that inlay of color that just makes my heart go pitter patter. I wasn't sure how much I was going to like this system, but actually I think I'm a little bit addicted now. So here I have the system. I'm going to tape my cardstock to the I don't know what they're called. One is called a chase. I don't know which is which. And then I have my Presstacular tulips that are on the base of the Better Press. And I'm just using that black Better Press ink to ink it up. I wasn't too worried about placement for this because I am going to be using the coordinating dies to cut these out. And once I ran this through my die cutting machine, I put it down on my Altenew sticky mat. I love this mat for stenciling and for coloring on. And so I'm just going to, because I have to shift my stencil because of the way that I added the tulips to the Better Press system, I need to kind of like rotate my stencil. The stencil actually does have markings, so there are etched markings to show you where you can line the A2 card panel up. It also has a numbering system. I believe there are a total of 5 stencils here, and we're starting with stencil number 1. So for the first layer, I'm using this beautiful Pink Fresh Studio ink. This one is called Candied Violet, and it's a beautiful purple, but I want to add just a touch more pink, so I'm going to bring in my blending brush and this bubble gum. So I'm just randomly adding it to certain areas. I don't know about you, but after creating all of my Christmas cards, I feel the need to use some more vibrant colors. So this card is really going to be just a bold statement. So there's our first layer. We're going to move on to our second layer. And for this layer, I'm using, I think it's called Raspberry Bliss, and a blending brush. Now I'm using my larger blending brushes for the tulips because it is a larger area. You'll notice when I start adding some of the color to the leaves and the stems that I do bring in a much smaller blending brush. I try to use the best size brush for the system that I'm doing. I don't like to waste a lot of ink. The larger the brush, the more ink you're using. And so if you don't have a large area, there's a lot of ink waste. So for my third layer, I brought in, I believe it was lavender, and you can see just how beautiful and vibrant those tulips are. I'm going to align these leaves, and I have to say, even if you don't use the etched lines to line up your stencils, this is so easy to align and the end product is just amazing. I was just so blown away by the shadowing that is included in these stencils. I think that it really just adds this pop of wow to the tulips. So as you can see, I have the meadow ink and I'm using that smaller blending brush, which is going to give me a much higher concentration of color, allowing me to get into those smaller areas. And I'll do the same thing on the right-hand side. So I do need to, with each side, I do need to adjust that stencil just because of the way that I used my Better Press. All right, so we're on to our final layer, and this one is going to be Emerald City. And I have a little bit smaller of a brush because this area is quite a bit smaller. And I'm just adding that concentration of color, and look how beautiful those tulips are. They are amazing. I have my Anna Griffin Mini Empress die cutting system, and I'm just using the coordinating dies. I'll run it through, and it cuts everything like butter, just so beautiful. I will need to trim off on that right-hand side. I don't like to use my die cutting machine. I don't like to use the dies all the way butted up to the edge. So I'll just trim that off, and then we'll run this through, and we'll move on to our frames. So for the frames today, I'm using the Crafty Meraki Frameworthy frames. There's 3 different frames in this set of dies, and when I used the first set, I took the middle-sized frame, and I took a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of cardstock, and I used the middle frame and cut it out. So now I have 2 frames there, and I have the center that came out of the middle frame, and I'm going to add a little bit of texture using the Mod Stripes hot foil plate. I'm going to be doing some embossing with this, so what I do is I run it through my die cutting machine using the sandwich that has the rubber mat, and that rubber mat allows that mod stripe to press into the cardstock. I did spritz it with a little water on the back of it before I ran it through. And I want to draw your eye into the center. I want you to be able to see the pattern, which is a little bit more subtle. And so what I'm doing is taking that Raspberry Bliss, I believe, and I'm just adding a little bit of that color to that center panel. It's going to allow those stripes to really show. I'm going to do a little bit of splattering with some water. And then I'm going to use, this is, I think, Dr. P.H. Martin's white paint. And I'm just going to add some splatters of water onto our tulips and then onto that center panel. And we're going to start building our card. So I used the Frameworthy dies to cut out a large frame, and then I cut out a smaller frame. As I mentioned, I had already used the middle-sized frame on an A2 card panel, but because I cut out the center of that A2 card panel, you can see that now I have that border that I'm able to use with the largest frame. So that purple was the largest frame die, and then this one, of course, is that A2 card panel. I just needed to trim off a little bit of the edge because it was hanging out the side. It wasn't aligning perfectly. And for this, I'm just going to use my wet glue and glue those together. And then I'll add it to my A2 top folding card base that you can see right there. So for my card base, I just went ahead and took an 8 1/2 by 11 piece of white cardstock. At the 8 1/2 inch side, I used my paper trimmer and I cut it right down the center at 4 1/4 inches. And then I used my bone folder to add the crease so that I could fold my card. So now I just need to add a little bit of wet glue here. And this is where the beauty starts happening. So you can see that I didn't add any dimension to these layers right here. And I'm going to show you how this third layer right here looks if I were to just add it to the center. So I'm trying to figure out which is best. Do I want that white to show? Do I want to add that pink back in? And I realize at this point that in order to really add a little bit more interest and to add a little bit more wow to the card, all I need to do is use this 1/8 inch foam tape on this layer, which is the smallest of the dies of the frames. And then I'm going to use it a second time on the pink layer. And then I'll inlay that embossed rectangle in the center, and that's going to add dimensional interest. If you don't have frames, as I may have mentioned that you can use rectangles to create frames if you have some nested dies. This would work really beautifully if you had ovals or circles, just adding steps of dimension, not actually, having some pieces that are inlaid and some pieces that are more dimensional really adds a lot of interest. And it's a simple way, if you don't have a lot of card supplies, to just create interesting card designs. So here are our tulips, and I'm going to add them to the corners. For my sentiment, I cut out a happy birthday greeting. I used the Gilded Greetings EAP. These EAP pads are fabulous if you haven't seen them. They are meant so that you can either use them on their own. In this case, that's what I'm doing with the sentiment that says happy birthday. I've just used the black sentiment. If you want to add a little bit more pizzazz, then you can use a mink machine or a laminator and some toner foil, and you can run it through your system and you can get some beautiful foiled sentiments if that would be your preference. It gives you a plethora of greetings, and then I believe there are some flowers that are also included for some really quick and easy cards. So here's where I mentioned that I was adding that foam tape, this 1/8" foam tape all the way around my frame. I'm going to add that to my card panel. I'll inlay the centerpiece, and then we'll finally add that purple frame, and we'll have that staggered interest, and you'll see just how much this really pops. Now I stuck with the same colors that I did my stenciling. I wanted something that was bold, and I went with more of a bright purple, and of course I went with the bright pink, and both of those coordinated really well with the colors that I used with my tulips. So we're going to inlay this piece. We'll add our frame over the top. And then we're going to add our tulips. So when I added the tulips, because I do have that indentation with the inlaid rectangle, I do need to add a little bit of foam tape here and there to those tulips so that when they go through the mail system, that they're not going to crease and dip in. And so I had the end of a roll of this 1/4" foam tape. So if you're wondering what that cardboard is on one side has the sticky side, the other side is cardboard. I'm just going to use some wet glue and add that to the cardboard side. It was just the end of the roll. I like to get as much use out of my products as I possibly can. So I do end up using these pieces. I'm going to have to strategically position them. I lay it down and then I realize that I have a little bit too much on one of the words, and I'm going to have to just kind of remove it and do a little bit of trimming, making sure again that this is laying flat. And then I'll do the same thing with my tulips. So my tulips are overhanging over that indentation layer, and so I'm going to add a little bit of foam tape to those areas, and then because it does hang over the 2 frames, I am going to add a little bit of foam tape just to the tips of those tulip layers. When I mail these dimensional cards, I never have any problems mailing them. I love dimension, and you're going to find that over the next few months as I share my card making with you. But I do use a lot of dimension when I'm making my cards, and so I like to make sure that everything is really stable. And then when I put my card in the envelope, I always make sure that the back of the card is facing the front where you're going to address the envelope so that when it runs through the meter machine, it doesn't create any indentations into the front of my card. I always get compliments on how well the cards are received, and that's one of the things that I found has been a really nice trick to do is to just add the front of the card to the back of your envelope, and that really prevents any damage. And it doesn't take I haven't had to add any additional postage either. So I'm going to add that one final layer. Now, this product suite does have a stamp. So if you prefer to do some coloring, then with your Copic markers or with some watercolors, then you certainly could use the stamp if you prefer. But I really like the elegance that the Better Press system allows for these designs. It really does add a touch of elegance to the card. And once I finish adding my sentiment, that is going to complete my card for today. So I hope that you take this tip and that you incorporate it into your card making, especially if you have limited supplies. There are ways that you can use dimensional tape and you can use simple products to add a lot of interest to your cards. I think that this turned out to be quite a beautiful card. I don't know. You let me know what you think in the comments section. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to add a few little gems using the iridescent twinkle treats to the card front. And once I add these little gems, that's going to complete the card. Thank you so much for joining me today. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Thanks so much for watching.